This week I'm going to show you my favorite way to build floating shelves. 10 years ago I built my first floating shelves, and I've built many more since then. And over the last decade of building floating shelves, I've learned a few things, and I think I've finally come up with the most perfect floating shelf. So you can kind of see it here because I'm testing it with 10 pounds per foot of weight, and the weights have been in overnight and there has been no change at all. So I'm really confident that this is plenty sturdy. The reason that I like this type of floating shelf so much is you can build it and paint it or stain it right on your workbench, and then bring the pre-finished shelf right into your room, put it where you want it, put screws into studs, and then float the top piece in so it's always removable if you want to take the floating shelf down. This is my test here, and I've used a lot of different scrap wood just to try to make it work. I'm gonna head on over to my workbench and build one from scratch. So getting started on the floating shelf, and I just want to show you guys real quick everything that you need to build it. So you'll need a 1x board in the width of the shelving that you want and in the length. So for example, I'm building about a 2-foot long shelf, so I have a 1x10 that's 2 feet long, and it's the depth. If you want a narrower shelf, just buy like a 1x8 or a 1x6 or smaller. I have 1x4s here, and those will be used to trim around the face of the shelf. You'll want some nicer boards here because those will be what you see. And then inside I have a 2x3, and this kind of works as the structure inside the shelf. You can buy these off the shelf at Home Depot. If you can't find them, you can also use a 2x4. It's a little bit different, and I can show you how to do that too. And for tools, you're going to need a brad nailer. You'll need a drill. You'll need some 1.25" brad nails to match your brad nailer. And then you'll need some 3-inch self-tapping screws. These will be used both for assembling the shelf and then also hanging the shelf on your wall. And usually these screws come with their own matching bits. You don't have to worry about that. Oh, and you'll need some coffee. All right, it's early. Gotta get started. Where do I start? Oh, you'll need some sort of saw to cut your boards with. So I'm going to recommend a compound miter saw if you have one, so that way you can make nice straight cuts. If you're cutting with a circular saw, you're going to need to do something like this, so that way you can get a nice straight cut. So they make a tool for that actually, and it's a very good one. Okay. You want to cut your shelf board to the length that you want your shelf to be minus 1.5 inches. So if you want a 24-inch shelf that's finished, cut your 1x board to 22.5 inches, 1.5 inches less than your overall desired length. So now we're going to cut the side trim pieces like this. So we'll need 2 of them, 1 for each end. And you do want to measure these and cut them, or you can scribe them, which I'm going to do so I can get a perfect fit. I'm just going to start nailing and gluing these guys on. I'm trying to see if there's a better side. So glue is very important here because this is part of the structure of the shelf. This is one of the big benefits of building it right here on the workshop, is you can build it really strong and glue all your joints, right? If you're trying to build it in place, like standing on top of your bathtub and trying to get your nail gun in between shelves, it gets really hard to do a good job. So this is why I like this method so much. Okay, so we'll do the other side here. So this end is going to add a lot of strength to the shelf, so it's very important that we glue it. And the nails are, they're invisible, like you can't even see them, especially if you stain it up, so that's why we're using nails, not screws here. So I got those 2 done, and now I'm just going to scribe cut these guys too. Yes. building a floating shelf really isn't that much more difficult than just building a simple wood box. But I do want to add some supports in here just to kind of beef it up. So that's where the 2x3 comes in. So we're going to put these guys like this in here. And you can put as many as you want or as few as you want. It kind of just depends on, you know, how much load you're putting on your shelf. So in the test shelf, I only had 2 and it was totally fine. But I do want to tell you one thing real quick. So if you know where your shelf is going to be hung, and these are just plywood walls, so you can see there's a stud, you might want to go and, let's say you wanted to hang it right here, and mark where your stud is. That way you don't put a support right over top of your stud. Okay, this should sit down 1/4 of an inch, and you can see that there. I'm just going to put one on each end for this shelf, but if you had a longer shelf, what you would want to do is put more in here. One every foot would definitely be more than enough. One every couple of feet would probably be proficient. So this screw is going to go in like this. It's a 3-inch screw, and we'll put 2. So we'll put one there and then one lower, and we'll do that for every one of these. And this is going to be the main structure of this shelf. I would have preferred to use a bigger head on this screw, but these are just what I have, and we live couple hours from Home Depot, so I don't have time to go get another one. So make sure it's self-tapping, because so that can drill into this. And the other thing is, if you are attaching at the ends like I'm doing here, make sure you glue really well around this, because it'll also add a lot to the structure. So go ahead and do that whole process right now. Now I'm just going to throw those screws in. So this back isn't going to be shown in the finished product, so I also want to attach on the front, but the front does not need to, the front doesn't need the same structural strength as the back, right? Because these screws are sticking out from the back and they're adding the strength. The front is just tying in the front. It's still structural, but it's not as important. But I don't want screws in the front because they'll be visible, especially on a stain finish. So what I'm going to do is nail there. I'll turn it this way so you can see. Probably way overkill, but that should strengthen it up, and I'll just repeat on the other side. Same thing. So I promised you, if you didn't have 2x3s and you only had 2x4s, I'd show you a way to do that too. So these are the 2x3s, and we'll just add a center one with a 2x4 so I can show you how to do that. So I'm just kind of marking how long this needs to be. So that'll go in like that. And the only thing is we want to make sure that this 2x4 is 1/4 inch down from the top. So see how there's a 1/4 inch gap at the top? We've got to finish that 1/4 inch gap. And the other thing is, we don't want to place this 2x4 where there's a stud on the wall, so it would get in the way of hanging it. So just those couple of things are all you need to know. So glue, just put glue on it. Okay, so those are the screws on the back side. We're 1/4 inch down, and I'm going to put the nails on the front side so you can see. So I'm going to float a piece of 1/4 inch plywood in the top of the floating shelf, and that will kind of finish out the top and hide how we attached it. what I do to cut 1/4 inch plywood that's really simple and really cheap is I keep some inexpensive foam in my garage. I've got two 2x4 sheets. And I can kind of position them however I want. And I cut right on top of it. So you can see like this line here is where I previously cut. And it just kind of acts as something for your blade to cut into, because you want your blade to cut all the way through the plywood. I've had these pieces of foam in my garage for a couple years now and they're still going. So you might have to replace them at some point, but you could probably get 5 to 10 years out of them. It's nice to have a straight edge, but if you don't have a straight edge and clamps and all that, let me show you some tricks. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my measurements that I want here. And then definitely, like if you don't have to worry about your eyes and it's being super loud, that's going to take some more factors off of cutting. So I always wear safety. And so then the saw blade is adjusted so it's just past the thickness of the plywood. So it just kind of dents that. So what I'll do is I'll pull that fence up and kind of start this where I can see the line. And notice I'm not looking at the blade. I'm totally right above I'm just looking at the line. And then I can just go ahead and start. Okay, so that gives us a nice straight square cut. And now it's so narrow, I'm gonna just go cross cut it on my miter saw. So at this stage, you really should stain or paint both the shelf and the 1/4 inch plywood that's going to go in it. But while I have a chance, I want to demonstrate how you're going to hang it. So what you're going to do is locate studs in the wall, and they're very obvious here. So you can see there's studs here and there's studs here. So go ahead and locate those in your wall with a stud finder, and then you'll bring your shelf up to wherever it is, and you'll need 2 screws. So one close to the top and one closer to the bottom to put the shelf in. So just go ahead and throw the 2 screws in there and the 2 screws in there, and make sure your shelf, put a level on it to make sure that you're hanging it level. And then take your 1/4 inch plywood panel and set it here, and then tack just a couple of 3/4 inch brad nails in. So you'll set the plywood panel in here, just tack a couple of brad nails in it, and that will hold the plywood, but you don't want to glue it, because if you ever want to take this down, you'll be able to just take a screwdriver and pull that panel right out and disassemble the shelf easily. I'm going to go ahead and finish up my shelves for real and haul them up and get them hung in my bathroom. So a little bit of production magic, and I've already got 2 floating shelves built and ready to hang, and I've got the perfect spot for them in my bathroom over my bathtub. Alright, so I got everything painted white, and I'm going to start hanging it. There's 2 different ways that this can be hung. You can hang it with the 1x board up or the 1x board down. So hanging it with the plywood up is easier to hang, and it's easier to put the plywood in, but if you want a stained finish, the plywood's going to look different. So I'm going to hang mine plywood up, but if you're staining it, I'm going to recommend hanging it plywood down. Hope that makes some sense. So right now I'm just going to figure out where I want it. Okay, I'm not going to tighten that first screw yet because I want to kind of level it up. Definitely hit a stud. Okay, I like that. So I'm going to tighten that screw a little bit. Okay, it's really important to get 2 screws, one on top and one on the bottom per stud. The other thing is it's good to go at an angle too. So you would never be able to actually fit your drill in there and screw it in straight. It's actually good to kind of angle that screw and it kind of works more like a hook. There we go. I honestly don't even think it needs the other screws, but I'm going to put them in there just for fun. Just to make my husband angry. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead of hanging the next one is I'm going to go ahead and put the plywood on, because once I hang the next one it'll get tight working in between the shelves. So
I guess you're in the bathroom.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the thing about putting this plywood in is I'm just going to put a few nails in it. You don't want to put too many in or glue it, because if you ever want to take this down, you don't want this to turn into a sledgehammer ordeal. So I just got some 3/4 inch brad nails in my mailer. So if you ever needed to take this out, you could just pry it out. Now, another thing I'm going to say, I wish I'd put supports on the ends here so I'd have something to tie in on the ends. So definitely if you're building this shelf, that's something that you could do to make yours even better. I'm only planning on putting towels and lightweight objects on these shelves, so the plywood up is totally fine. But if you wanted to put heavier things like books or pantry items, maybe flip it over and put the 1x12 side up. Okay, so I'm going to work on the one up above it, but I'm going to cheat this time and use some spacers. So that's pretty much done, but I'm going to go ahead and touch up paint the little nail holes and make it all look perfect. The floating shelves are done and they're all hung and they look amazing. I'm so excited about them. Honestly, I was a little bit hesitant because I'm somewhat of a minimalist to put them on the walls. But now that I have them up there, it just makes the space feel put together and lived in. So I really love it. I will say I feel like the 1x10 depth is pretty deep. It's important to do that depth because I wanted to fold towels on it, but it does stick out pretty far. So maybe consider a 1x8. That's the great thing about building your own floating shelves. You can really customize them to exactly what you need. I love the height that these are hung at, and just super excited about them. I'm going to go ahead and fill them up with some candles and some bath salts, and maybe I'll get a bubble bath out of the video. We appreciate you guys watching. I will link in the description step-by-step tutorial with diagrams on how I built this with all the tips. So you can just click on over there and download the cut list and all the specifics from there. So we appreciate you guys watching this week, and we shall see you next Monday.